Welcome to the Elite Performance Podcast. Today, our guest is John Garrish of North Broward Prep High School in Coconut Creek, Florida. John is amongst one of the top young strength and conditioning coaches in the country. He's also had stops at North Texas and the Rutgers. He hosts a great roundtable discussion for high school strength and conditioning coaches. He's very active in our field and is a great young resources for high school strength and conditioning coaches. And he's doing a great job with his young athletes at North Broward Prep. Today we talk about what young coaches need to do to make themselves viable options in the future of high school strength and conditioning, how he structures his training programs, some of the pros and cons of working in the high school, his influences on his athletes, and much more in this hour-long discussion on his training at North Broward. As always, if you gain something from this, please give us a follow on Twitter at BBA Performance or on Instagram at BBA Performance. And give a shout out to John for sharing such great information today. So without further ado, let's get to John. Welcome back to the Elite Performance Podcast. Today we have a great guest, John Garrish from North Broward Preparatory High School in Coconut Creek, Florida. John, how are you doing today?
Coach, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Now, you work as a full-time strength coach in a high school setting.
Yes, sir.
How did you come about getting into the high school level? How was your path? And that's kind of a career path now. High school strength and conditioning coaches is, I think, on the rise. And I think a lot of kids probably or potential coaches don't think about coaching at the high school. But how did you land in a high school setting?
Yeah. Well, thanks for asking that question because the high school level is something that I'm very passionate about. And I think a lot of coaches at this level are like myself that, quite frankly, I got lucky. I had expected to do. I was passionate about the college level and wanted to be there, and I thought that was my landing spot. And ultimately, I'm from South Florida. I was working at Rutgers at the time, and one of my buddies, who happens to be the brother of our head basketball coach at North Broward, called me and said, "Hey, I know you love South Florida. I know at some point or another you want to come back home. Would you be interested in hearing about a job that opened up at North Broward Prep?" And I knew of the school. Actually, the school, North Broward, is the closest campus to the house I grew up in. I didn't go to North Broward, but it was a quarter mile probably, if that, from the house that I grew up in. So I knew all about the school. I knew a bunch of people that went there. But I, still, even knowing the type of school that North Broward is and the commitment that they have to athletics, I had some fears. I had some concerns that maybe this, what you typically heard, at least what I typically heard before accepting a position and getting to know all the coaches that I have gotten to know, luckily and thankfully at the high school level, is I didn't know there was really positions out there like this. I thought that, when I went to sit down with the athletic director, he was going to tell me I would be expected to be a football coach and a PE teacher, and hey, your title's going to be strength coach. So handle the strength and conditioning for the football team. Work with whatever athletes you can on the side, and hey, that's your duties. And I sat down with the athletic director, and we had a 2 or 3 hour long conversation. It happened to match up. He was moving into this new role at North Broward. I was in town for a weekend. I don't even remember what it was. And he said, "Hey, I caught you this weekend. Do you think we could get together and we could talk?" And I told him I don't really have like formal interview apparel, but I would love to come in and chat with him. And we talked. And like I said, what really sold me on the position is we ended up it felt like I was talking to a strength coach. It felt like how you and I were talking just 5 minutes ago. We were just talking about strength and conditioning. And although maybe his experience level and his knowledge level wasn't to the extent maybe of, other coaches in the field, his passion certainly rivals anybody that I've ever met, their passion and interest in the strength and conditioning profession. So he had told me that, hey, you're going to be our full-time strength and conditioning coach. This is your sole duty is to work with not just one team, but all teams. You're expected to know at least every single student athlete on campus and work with them in some context. And I'll talk a little bit later about like realistic expectations for that. But, just hearing that and hearing what kind of benefits that a position like this sets somebody like myself up for. At that time, I was 23 years old, and hearing about it and seeing all the great things that could happen. That was when my eyes first opened to the beauty of the high school profession. And then you get in, you get your boots on the ground and you start to work with our guys and gals at our school. And you just find, I found really quickly, it didn't take much more than a month to know where my home was. And to know that, there is so many great things that could happen at the high school level, not just with the kids, but with the profession and what we can do as professionals. Now, the other end of it, I said that many coaches that are in my position, frankly, we got lucky. There's a lot of coaches out there that want to bust into the high school level and feel as though they're unlucky. I do think that there's some things that are really going to take off here as far as, full-time positions. But I think as far as if you really, really want to get into the high school level, the number one thing that you should do is go out and get a teacher certification. That's the easiest way to get in from a public school stance or from a private school stance. If you have the ability to teach, also work your knowledge. A lot of strength coaches, a lot of performance coaches do their best to learn and read about certain sports, become knowledgeable in sports to the extent that maybe you can coach a sport. I think that is going to be another thing that's going to help you a ton. And don't expect to just step into a position where they say you're the full-time strength coach, no sport coaching responsibilities, no teaching responsibilities. Don't necessarily be the jack of all trades, be an expert in our profession, but have the ability to go out and work in different avenues.
Yeah, that was awesome. A lot of good nuggets there. So you kind of touched upon this a little bit. So what teams are you currently working with? What all sports teams go to you? And what are some of the different challenges you see with each population? Obviously, for any high school or college coach, when you might have anywhere from 12 to 20 teams, not enough hours in the day to coach all those teams, different populations of guys and gals and demands of the sports. So how do you address all those vast differences between the amount of athletes, freshman to senior, the amount of teams you work with, how do you address all that?
Yeah, that's probably the toughest part about the job. I don't want to say the teams that you would expect are the teams that I see most often, but number one, I'll say that a majority of our athletes, maybe not a majority, but a lot of our athletes are single sport participants. So that's a battle in itself. Trying to be the voice that tells them that they should be coming into after school workouts with their, primary team, and also being that voice that's telling them, well, maybe they should participate in some other sport. And, that might pull them away from the weight room a little bit. So sometimes I get my tongue tied on that. Some of the sports that we see most, football is going to be that seems to be the sport that's most committed from a standpoint of the number of athletes that are there, the consistency of their attendance. And the number one thing that usually determines the commitment of the sport, and this is really with anything, is it all comes down from leadership. It all comes down from their sport coach. So some of our sport coaches that are on campus and teaching on a daily basis, those are the sports that usually are the most committed, just because their main commitment is the campus, is the students on campus, is our teams. We've got some great coaches that are coaching other sports, and either they're teaching, they're coaching a club team and they're off campus, or they have their own thing going. One of our coaches that does a really good job with being off campus, but also having his sport very, very committed and consistent, is our basketball coach, our boys basketball coach. Our girls basketball coach is on campus and her team's in nonstop. Our boys coach is off campus and they're still in nonstop. Most committed teams, our baseball team. We've got a hockey team, which is very rare in South Florida.
Yeah.
It's very, very rare in South Florida. And, some of my best come from that team. And, there is very unique perspectives coming from each of those sports. And that's another thing that's beautiful about working at this level. It creates a challenge, getting to know and learning which buttons to press for all different students and all different athletes. But that's where you kind of master the art of coaching. You know,
Yes.
I use this analogy or this explanation all the time. At any given time in our weight room, we've got for instance, our football team, we've got a 4-star wide receiver that'll be going to whatever school he decides he wants to go to in a couple years. And then we've got a Asian residential student that's never played football before, quite frankly, never thought of it until they got to our campus 2 weeks earlier and decided that football looked cool. And, I want to do everything in my power to show the level of commitment to both of those athletes. And then you have those two characters and then insert about potentially 70 different characters in the weight room at the same time.
Yeah.
That's where the biggest battle and that's where the biggest challenge comes, or one of the biggest challenges anyway. But it's a blast because you've got so many different characters in there. You've got so many different personalities in there. We have a good time, and that's what it's all about,
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing I address to our interns all the time is that throughout a given day at our facility, you could have a 9-year-old, you could have a freshman in high school that doesn't know how to skip, doesn't know how to shuffle. You could have an all-American college. I mean, getting exposed to all those populations, like you said, makes you a better coach, a well-rounded
Sure.
coach. You're
Absolutely.
exposed to every type of environment that you could ever dream of, and you grow as a coach. You're like 1 year in this environment, you're just like you've been exposed to everything. It's awesome.
Oh yeah, and it's humbling. It's humbling,
Yeah.
and it has also forced me to accept a couple defeats, not necessarily defeats, but make a few changes from a programming standpoint and from a coaching standpoint. Just the expectations. If I can use a analogy of expectations that I've heard from coaches, but there's cuss words in it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we try to stay away from expectations. I set a certain list of expectations, but if understanding that if I expect one thing from a movement standpoint from one individual or from a training standpoint from one individual, it might be significantly different from another. And it's forced me to kind of get a lot more general from a programming standpoint and, meeting our markers and making sure we're doing the right things movement and technique wise. But also from a coaching standpoint, kind of meeting myself in the middle and understanding that everyone's kind of at different levels has been really, really kind of awakening.
Okay. So what does your typical day look like? Are athletes, they come in as teams before and after school, or they're sprinkled in classes during the day? How are you working with all these athletes and teams, and what's your typical schedule look like?
I hardly see anyone throughout the school day. There might be one or two individuals that can't make it before or after school, and I'll make sure that, say it's usually the guys or gals that I'll see during school is they usually have some sort of limitation from an injury standpoint.
Okay.
A lot of coaches think it's funny, or everyone thinks it's kind of interesting when I tell them this. There is a weight training, quote unquote, weight training teacher in the weight room for all of our classes. That's our football coach,
Okay.
who of course is completely on board with what we're accomplishing from a strength and conditioning standpoint. That is typically for your other students that aren't competing in sports,
Okay.
that want to come in and kind of more residential, just come in and work out on their own, recreational. So there will be, however, either we have some study hall periods, every student will have one study hall period, or they might be in that weight training class. So if an individual can't get to, say and I'll get to what goes on before and after school, but say their group is scheduled before school and they can't get a ride, they take the bus. Same thing after school, so they can't come either. Maybe there's an instance where if they're in that class, I'll work with them, or they'll just have their sheet, and for the most part, everybody knows what's going on.
Okay.
And there's always somebody in the weight room, but they can kind of handle it on their own.
Okay.
And then, like I said, if an athlete is injured, and sure, they're still going to go out to practice, and really, if you have somebody hanging in the weight room that is coming off a sprained MCL or something like that, and I've got my full basketball program, varsity, JV, and freshman, and we've got all these athletes in there, and then I have, maybe one soccer lady with, her sprained MCL. It becomes very tough to account for everybody.
Yep.
So that's where, athletes that need kind of that more individual attention, they'll come in during school, and that's when I'll see them. Otherwise, during school, that's like my planning, that's my programming, that's my professional and continued education is what I do for the most part. Maybe go around and check in with local coaches at that time, or really just kind of roam campus and get to know people and meet face to face with some teachers and some staff. Before school, usually we'll have 3 groups, which is something that I'm toying with in the future here. When we have our new facility and some things might change, we have our soccer coach brings his guys in before school in the fall. So this is before they start their official season. We have soccer in the winter here because there's no such thing as winter in South Florida. So we can play outdoor sports pretty much whenever we want. So our high school season starts in the winter for soccer. They started last week.
Okay.
So they're just getting going. The time before that, their preseason is going to be before school, and they're going to see me before that. Since we don't have a weight room on campus for the last few months while we're in transition to a new weight room, we've basically ultimately what I've done with them is a lot of movement and virtually an extended warm up before practice, before their preseason training.
Yep.
With their coach. So, and then, so they'll actually come in, I'll see them at 6. That'll be my first group in the morning. Our first bell rings at 8:20. I'll then have, and this is the reason why I might hesitate to say some things, is because our new facility, we've been out of a facility on campus for 8 months now. So we're going off campus to a weight room that's like 20 minutes away. It's just not possible to do that before school to our kids. We're not bringing them. So anyone that I see now is on campus. Really the only 2 groups that I see before school, sorry if I'm speaking in circles, right now is our boys soccer program, who just finished because they're starting their season, and our varsity and JV dance program. I'll see them before school. Typically, I have soccer at 6. Baseball would start at 7:15, and 6:45, and basketball would start at 7:15. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I would work the dance girls in there. Basketball wouldn't be in at 7:15. I would have the dance teams in at that time. And then that would be my last group from 8:15 through the school day. I'm kind of just hanging out. Like I said, I'm doing kind of reviewing what happened in the morning, what's to come in the afternoon, getting anything settled that I need to. After school, we'll usually kind of stagger it in the same way. I'll have 3 groups. Your first group's going to be our primary out-of-season program. So in the winter, spring, usually that turns into football. And I'll see an in-season program, in-season team at that time as well. So usually like in the fall, when football comes in, they'll just have like a 20-minute quick get in, get out. I'll see the cross-country team, same thing, 25 minutes, get in, get out, and the cheerleading team. And that's when the weight room is most busy. In the fall, right after school, when I have the in-season groups before they go out to practice, there could be as much as 85 students in our weight room. And then after that, we'll go to an out-of-season. Usually that would be boys and girls basketball in the fall. And then we would get anyone else in the last group in season that was coming in after practice, maybe volleyball. If baseball has fall ball going and they're not coming before school, they might come in that time. And that would be a typical day. And then really virtually it stays the same, just the team shift as we vary through the seasons. So in the winter, it'll be different teams here and there. Spring, different teams here and there. Summers are the time we really get going.
Yes, yeah. Now, you kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, but so when the team comes in, say it's football, whatever sport, like you said, you could have a freshman who's never been in a weight room to a senior that, get a Division I scholarship.
Sure.
How are you catering to those different populations? I know a lot of coaches do different blocks or, block 0,
right.
Yeah. How are you addressing, say, the freshman to the senior if the whole team's in together? What's the training process for each kind of age group or class?
Yeah, so we have. I'm by trade a modified tier system program, or a altered tier system program, I guess you could say. And from that, it very much models what Joe Ken suggests in his blocks. And this is all information that's kind of secondhand to me. I interned under Frank Wintrick at North Texas. So I forget his colors that he used, but the way that we use it, our block zero, we don't technically use that term. We'll just call that the developmental group.
Yep.
And that's usually my middle schoolers. That's usually eighth graders that are, say maybe an eighth grade football player that just finished his middle school season. We have K through 12, really pre-K. So an eighth grader that just finished his middle school football season is in the winter training with the varsity team, because we don't have a JV or a freshman football team. It goes middle school to varsity. If you're a middle school player as an eighth grader, that doesn't mean you're necessarily contributing as far as minutes and playing time goes, but you're going to be with the varsity program. So our training is that way. When the football team's in, the whole team's in. And the eighth graders are expected to be there as well. So when they come in, that's who models kind of our Block Zero program. And really what you're seeing is what a lot of great coaches that have put out before us, a lot of body weight movements. If I feel comfortable with their body weight, squat, hinge, push and pull, I'm pretty happy there. If they go into the summer as incoming ninth graders, then they would be ready to move some weights around, and not significant, with still introduction, but I can at least feel comfortable with the barbell in their hands potentially. It is not a grade-based development program. So we go developmental, we go white, and white's typically another developmental phase, and then we go blue, and then we go gold. Now, white, typically where you see that most, that becomes those incoming ninth graders. So I said those eighth graders go through the spring, and they go through kind of our Block Zero. They come into our summer program in the white developmental group. If you're a middle schooler, obviously no offense to them, but if you went to some public school down the street and you're coming into North Broward as a ninth grader, I've never seen you before. You're going through our Block Zero that mimics what you saw from the middle schoolers in the winter and spring. And then once they basically go in season, your blocks kind of, they certainly don't go away, but we don't pay as much attention to your white, your blue, your gold, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So typically white kind of carries you throughout your freshman season and freshman school year, leading into the spring and summer. And this is typically your sophomores and your less experienced juniors are in that blue developmental, and your veteran juniors and elite, more experienced seniors are your gold elite program. What varies throughout those, blue and gold, the main difference there is going to be intensity and volume. Blue is going to stay higher volume, lower intensity. When you get into that gold, that's when we're really getting after it. Another thing that really matters to us from a gold standpoint, if you're in gold, is the trust factor. I trust you. If you're in that program, that means, if we're in a day where I'm asking for an RPE 9, and what would typically be an RPE 9 for you is an RPE 6 or 7, I trust you, and you can get after it if you want to.
Yep.
That becomes what the gold really is, it's kind of take the leash off a little bit and, let them get after it.
Okay.
Does that answer it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. So what does your typical training session look like from warm up to completion?
Sure. So we have so many groups, or we have so many individuals. I've been blessed with great interns, really great volunteers is what I prefer to call them, because oftentimes they teach me a lot more than I could ever teach them. So I don't really look at them as interns that, like, I tell them, you're never going I'm never going to tell you to wipe down a bench or wipe up a mirror or, do anything like that. Like, we're going to all do that together. It's, ultimately what the hiring process looks like is if I had something to pay you, we would go through the same hiring process. Unfortunately, and it's not in the budget right now. So you have to volunteer. But I look for coaches that I trust, coaches that are going to bring something to the program, and coaches that are going to be willing to coach and be themselves. So what happens typically, as long as I have 2 or more assistants in there, what we'll do is we'll break up into groups of 3s, and usually your veterans are going to start on their tier 1 lift. The blue and potentially some of the white athletes that are, meaning white developmental athletes, obviously, that are transitioning from that developmental phase into our blue stage of development, are then in that group potentially. And then our white developmental or our block 0 individuals that are doing very similar things are in that 3rd group. Usually our tier 1, like the way that we're setting it up right now in our off-campus site, we have our weight room. We have what I call a deadlift room, which really all it is, it's like a locker room. And I put flooring in there, and we've got our trap bars, and potentially we could bring in some barbells in there. And then we have the basketball gym. So what would usually happen on the court is, I was lucky enough to have a great coach that is extremely experienced with kettlebells. Now, we don't necessarily have kettlebells, but he was able to do a lot of things from a hinging perspective. Yep. that really, really, really helped us. And we could use all of that space, and we can do some other things as well in there. And then we would first do a rotation. We would all be together for a general warm up, and then we would break into our groups. We would go through one rotation of like a movement prep, a mobility, some type of preparation movement that we were looking for. And then the next rotation through those 3 groups would be our lifts.
Okay. Awesome. Speaking of your warm up, I encourage everybody to go follow Coach Garrish on Instagram. He does a great job of giving some insight into his programs and some great informational videos. But one thing you talk about, and that is you do like a kind of prisoner wall squat. Mm-hmm. You went over in great detail of how you kind of use that as kind of a screen or assessment on squat mechanics, movement mechanics for certain athletes. So can you just briefly break down kind of what you're looking for in that prisoner wall squat and all the information that you gain just by kind of using your warm-up or activation, we want to call it, as a screen or assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, thank you for pointing that out, and thank you for following and pointing out the information. I really appreciate that. Sometimes I have concern that it's not helpful information. So hearing that it is
absolutely
grateful. Thank you. So yeah, I'm not sure if there's anything that we could find and perform that would be perfect. I don't think the wall squat is the absolute perfect model exercise, but it is a the way that we are going to perform a squat. We are going to sit our hips back. There's not too much in the way, certainly in catching the Olympic lifts for us that we're doing right now. So for the most part, the way that we're squatting to slightly below parallel. We're sitting our hips back. I'm telling them the 3 most important things that we look for: hips are sitting back, knees are going to be out, chest is going to be up. Okay. So we go through, and I shared some of the progressions that we go through before we get to the wall squat, because I don't think it would be fair to the athletes, to our students, to just throw them on a wall and say squat. Sometimes it is a good idea. Maybe that's not a bad idea to do the first day, so you can kind of see, some athletes would come in day 1, stand up, basically their toes against the wall, and be able to perform a squat. And they have that sort of hip mobility and thoracic spine mobility and movement pattern. Usually those are your shorter limb athletes that can really just get in there and do that. And that's why I say it's not perfect, because, it's not always a one size fits all. I've seen some of our, 5'6" to 5'8" athletes that can get up their toes against the wall and they can squat and it looks perfect. And then I've seen some guys that are near a foot taller than them that it just wouldn't make sense. It's just not possible.
Yep.
So typically what we like to do is we like to understand that it's not one size fits all. If you can get your toes somewhere between like that 4 to 8 inch range from the wall, and perform a quality squat, I feel pretty confident about getting some weight in your hands. That's our last body weight movement, body weight prerequisite or progression before our first loaded movement, which, depending on who it is, would either be probably a landmine squat or a goblet squat. It would be an anterior load. What we would go through first, a body weight air prisoner squat, or even a hands-free, just looking at how they move. And then we would perform a squat to bench. So that would mean there is some sort of implement, or some sort of not implement, but there's something that we want them to squat back to.
Yep.
And then we go squat from bench, which actually means kind of knees up against the bench.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like you're standing up against a bench and you're sitting back in a squat. It's basically a wall squat, but take away the barrier from the waist up. So then that provides a very easy progression to talk to the athletes about, because then I can tell them, okay, place your knees against the bench and squat. And I don't know if you can envision it right now, but the first thing they're going to do, their shoulders are just going to fold forward, and they are going to sit their hips back because they have no choice. But we both know that wouldn't be an appropriate squat pattern that we're looking for. So then we say, okay, well, what do you think we can do to cut out folding forward like that? And, some athletes click, some athletes don't. And I take them over to a wall and they say, oh, I've done wall sits before. Okay, I'm going to sit with my back against the wall. And we tell them, no, that's not what we're looking for. I want you to face the wall. And like I said, those three things, if you can perform a wall squat to depth, I'm very, very confident that you can sit your hips back, you can push your knees out, you can keep your chest up, and you have that appropriate hip and T-spine mobility. If you meet the other markers from a age and developmental standpoint, I feel confident to add load. And it is something that we do. It's not a progression and that's it. That's something we will do. That is incorporated into our movement prep. Just about every day we have some sort of squat pattern, which is at least twice a week.
Nice. So for all your teams now, for your movement practice, how are you addressing that? Is it Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays linear, Tuesday, Thursdays?
Yeah.
How are you doing those things?
Yes, we're going Monday, Wednesday, Friday is our days in the weight room, and Tuesday, Thursday is our field. I break it up. When you were addressing linear, I don't know if you were talking about from a periodization standpoint or from a field standpoint, but
like linear speed, acceleration.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. All right, cool. So usually I actually have 3 days that we would cycle through. You could probably consider it 4 on those field days. So I have a linear day. I have a lateral and change of direction. I don't like to necessarily just mesh those two together. It doesn't necessarily always work like that.
Yep.
But depending on where we're at and who I'm working with, it'll be lateral or change of direction and/or some sort of recovery day. That's going to be a lot of mobility. And the fourth one that'll rotate through is like a just straight up fun, enjoyment day. So we might cycle it like what's going on in the weight room is relatively consistent year round. What goes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, it might go linear, then, maybe regen on Thursday, and then the next Tuesday, maybe lateral. And then that next Thursday, maybe like a med ball volleyball or, some different drills that basically address what the things are we're looking for on those other field days.
Well, during those movement days, what kind of progression are you using there? Say a linear day. What is your thought process in developing that training program for that day?
Okay. From a yearly standpoint or?
Yeah, say for yearly, and then, what are you progressing to within those individual sessions? Are you working, mechanics for a first part and then trying to apply that to an open environment? What are some of the thought processes going to that?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think a majority of what we spend our time on those days are what to the blind eye looks like a warm-up. We spend a lot of time in there. There might be, as long as we're And usually this is just basing off of the athlete's reactions and things like that, meaning nonverbal communication, if we're getting redundant or not. A lot of things will take place in what looks like warm-up lines, and we're staying through there, especially on those lateral days or change of direction days, really, where there's a lot of force absorption. I talked on Instagram about like some of our one-step stick, 1-2 stick protocols, and getting in different directions with that. We'll spend a ton of time on that. What progresses, I would say, is the intensity on an annual basis. Or, so if first, just like you said, we're focusing on mechanics, and then we are gradually introducing greater distances from a sprint standpoint. So working with high school athletes, and I know you work with a bunch of high school athletes as well, very rarely do we go out and they pull a hamstring because they're not ready to go. That's one of the blessings of the level. But at the same time, I think of all my aches and pains and how I have to now warm up for 30 minutes when before I could, touch my toes and be ready to go. Maybe some of this harm was done then, when I didn't necessarily prepare my body in the way that I probably should have. So although I might be able to go out and tell them, hey, we're going to run, not necessarily test, but we're going to sprint 40 yards today. I don't necessarily still agree with that means of thinking. We'll focus on how we sprint for 10, and then next week we'll focus on how we sprint for 20, and so on, and building up there. And then when we're capable of it, we'll do the same thing from a resistance standpoint, and we'll add some resistance. And that's talking specifically with linear. We'll do some things lateral from a crossover run and maybe even a shuffle standpoint that mimic that from a loading, potentially adding resistance. But in a change of direction, we're looking first and foremost, most importantly, for how we can absorb force. It mimics very much, our change of direction mimics very much some of the things that I addressed on Instagram with the med ball throws. Yep. As maybe potentially silly as that sounds, we first, absolutely, no question, no doubt about it, have to be able to absorb force before we even think about getting our foot in the ground and sprinting and changing directions at high velocities. So that'll be the first thing we concern ourselves with, and that's why we do a lot of the stick progressions through all of our warm-ups. And then we could add different angles. We could add different velocities. I do like the approach. Fred Eves gave it to me. Well, it's been something that's been used for so long, just going through something 50%, 75%, and then let's get after it at full speed and kind of just let the kids do what they do. That's when when we're going through, if we set up cone drills or we go through some sort of chase or tag or some sort of fun competition drill, that's when I kind of just take my coaching out of it and kind of allow themselves to figure those things out themselves. We've coached them through the warm up, and we've coached them through some of those movement and specifics. Let's now let them go out there and we can address things later on.
Yeah, that's great stuff. We tell our athletes all the time, you can only produce as much force as you can absorb. Mm-hmm. That's what I love about what you do is you put so much emphasis on that force absorption, eccentric portion, because it's great for performance, and also we know that it can reduce his risk of injuries. Yeah. And it's something that just kids, young athletes, don't get exposed to enough. So I love that progression of we're going to learn how to absorb these positions and master these positions and control them before you're trying to, build that big engine on your Ferrari.
Yes, sir.
That's awesome. So like I said, high school, oftentimes can be the end game for a lot of your athletes, while some other ones are going on to play college and whatnot. So, different goals for different athletes. What do you want all your athletes kind of take away from your presence?
Yeah, that's another great question. Thank you for asking it, because it's something that means a lot to me. Is some of my, 3 out of 4 of my Iron Eagles, that means the, kind of strength and conditioning athlete of the year, I guess you could say. Since I've been at North Broward, they knew when they received that award, and I knew when I handed that award out, that they were not going to compete in college athletics. I want them to understand there's nothing wrong with that. You would never, that will never upset me. working with students that have truthfully no interest in competing in college athletics, that's not a problem with me. That doesn't bother me. Then you're exactly right. How do we match the goals? And how do we meet the goals of each of our students in that right? So certainly I think it somewhat the program we do. I mean, my motto sort of is I work at North Broward Preparatory School. It's a college preparatory school. My strength and conditioning program is a college preparatory strength and conditioning program. I want you to have a healthy 20-year career if it's going to be. But if it's not, there is nothing wrong with that. If I have 100 kids in a weight room, probably 80 of them aren't going to go compete in college athletics.
Absolutely.
And if those 80, even if just one says, Coach Garrish gave me something that makes me not hate working out, I've succeeded, is how I feel about those individuals. Everybody knows it's an ongoing discussion of how can we get people more interested and more invested in their personal fitness. And it is a very long-term deal, and it's so much larger than athletics.
Yeah.
And it's so much larger than just those athletes, those 20% or so athletes that are going on to compete in college. It matters every bit as much to me.
Yeah, that's great stuff. And like you, it's awesome when athletes go to college or whether they play or not, and they come back, say during Thanksgiving break, which is coming up, or for a weekend, and they stop out at the facility or back at the weight room just to say hi. Like before they even stop at home, they stop back to say hi, catch up for 5 minutes. And I mean, that's the impact, I think, especially at the high school level, that we can have on those kids. Because like you said, what they learn from us is probably the best fitness or wellness, or nutrition, all that kind of information they'll get the rest of their lives.
Right.
Like you said, if that can empower them for a healthier life, for a better relationship with fitness, I mean, that's the end game. I mean, that's the winner for everybody.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And I do have a handful, I would say maybe 5% of our participants in the strength and conditioning program that are non-athletes. Dare I say that. They're athletes because they're coming into the weight room and working out and they're doing other things, but they're not competing for our school in athletics. And we're training as though we're athletes, and we're training as though we're preparing for competition on a Thursday or Friday or whatever it is. If you're okay with my terminology in preparation for that, and you're okay with wanting to be more healthy, and maybe if you do decide to recreationally compete in some sport and you want to be healthier and you want to perform better in that sport, I always encourage that participation from those students. And that just goes beyond that it doesn't even necessarily have to be students that aren't going to compete in college. You don't have to compete in high school to me. That's
a really neat environment. When you're looking at your program or what you're doing right now, how would you say that differs from last year's or years past? What are some things that maybe you're new to implement this year, or you've tweaked and changed around?
Yeah, I think it's just an ongoing adjustments always, that if anything, I feel more so like it's getting closer, and I think I'm going to feel like that for the rest of my career.
Yeah.
Like I'm finally getting closer to perfecting what's going to work for our North Broward Prep student athletes. But that'll never happen. Just like I said, there's nothing that's perfect. There's no, there's some A standards and there's some gold standards, but there's nothing out there that's perfect. One of the things that I think that I'd say really changed, just from a standpoint of overall programming, getting more general, and understanding that there are some things that we need to master that come first and foremost to all those kind of cute things that you see on social media. Yeah. Just learning how to master those basics, and some of the basics that I addressed. If I feel as though, even if I have an athlete that's going on to say, I don't want to leave anybody out, so I won't specify, but say one of my student athletes is going to the absolute best strength and conditioning program at the college level. I want to prepare them for that. But if I send them to that program and they can squat, hinge, push, and pull with the best of them, even though they can't bench press 400 pounds, I'm fine with that. That's okay. That is every bit as much a success as accomplishing some of those numbers and some of those higher totals from a lifting standpoint. If you can master those, and the more that I understand that, it's more about focusing on where my knowledge is, and it's more about focusing on what can help them from a general context, and less about how I can necessarily specifically add a mile per hour to their fastball.
Yeah.
And worrying less about that and more about mastering the basics of what we want to look for, and trusting in our sport coaches to be the ones that can get them to that point, and kind of just give them, this is the product that we're going to give you. And we expect the sport coaches to be every bit as masterful as everybody in our athletic department.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say the big change was just getting more general, getting back to the basics. And it goes so far beyond just programming and what goes on in the weight room. Conversation, personality, just getting, worrying less about like what things look like and worrying more about what truly is. Really getting to know our student athletes and knowing what buttons to press, so much more than just they need 10 reps rather than 8 reps on a back squat. They need to talk to somebody about what's going on at home. That's what happens at the high school level that is just unmatched anywhere else.
Yeah. The impact and the relationships that you build, and they're at an age where they can be molded, or they
Absolutely.
want those role models or influences in their life that it can positively. I've got the 2 coaches that affect me most of my life: high school track and
Yeah.
basketball coach. And I mean, I love those guys to death, and I still look up to them to this day, for advice and all that kind of stuff. And that's, like you said, the power of being in the high school setting. I think more so than the college or professional, even though those tend to be something kind of gold standards where people want to be at those levels.
Yeah, there's tremendous impact that can be made at those levels. It's just different.
Yeah.
I think, there's not a way to say, such and such is better,
Yeah.
more impactful. Sure. I think a lot of former student athletes, whether they stopped after high school or whether they stopped after 20 years of professional basketball, always resort back to what that high school coach told them.
Yep.
I think a little bit. I think even more than that, I think what's so awesome about being a strength and conditioning coach is, we also get to, I think if you polled 100 former student athletes and, the cream of the crop from an athletic standpoint were that whatever, 5-10%. And those were the ones that really like loved their head coach. Maybe like the bottom 20% wasn't so fond of their
Yep.
football coach because they didn't get playing time and felt they should have. At the strength and conditioning profession, and especially just knowing the individuals and knowing the people that are in this profession and kind of what our true investment lies in, I think the impact is it's just powerful. I mean, it's you now feel every bit as impactful for those athletes that aren't playing so much,
Yeah.
maybe even more, because they commit themselves so heavily into what's going on. And it's no longer dependent on playing time. It's no longer dependent on wins and losses.
Yeah.
There is so much that goes on in the weight room I mean, the absolute gifts of the weight room and what it teaches people, I think a lot of us, I look back to my high school strength coach, and I think, moving forward, especially when the profession grows, student athletes are going to look back to their strength coach. Hopefully our athletes look back and think about me, and I'll say, I did nothing. It was the weights that taught you all those lessons. It was the weight room that taught you all those lessons. It was the expectations to be present and be accountable. It wasn't an individual. It was all yourself. It's just it's really cool. It's exciting to be at this level.
Yeah, absolutely. With that being said, what do you see as a trend or prediction, say in our field as a whole, the strength and conditioning field, for the next, say, 5-10 years? Do you see anything that is on the rise, or any predictions you want to make about kind of the profession?
Yeah, I'm not going to make any precise ones, but I can certainly say technology, obviously, as it already has, is going to take a strong hold in our profession. I think our profession is so steadfast and strong that we're going to be able to take it and run with it rather than kind of let it take us, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So technology is going to be very important to us, but we're still going to be in control. Our profession is awesome, and it's led by tremendous individuals with much greater experience than myself that I trust and confide our profession in. That would be the obvious one. I think technology certainly is going to take its hold, and then things that look at what's already come. And I know this has been years and years and years in the making, but how much of an impact some of the research recently, even with velocity-based training, is. And think about maybe some other things that are going to come from technology moving forward. And especially when it becomes more accessible to everybody, even us at the high school level. Our budgets are probably smaller. The opportunity to gain and invest in some technology might be a challenge to us. But like Gary Schofield always says, at one point it's going to be affordable. We never thought GPS would be affordable years ago. He always uses that analogy. So predictions, did you ask another question on that?
Nope, just that's about it. Yeah, whatever you see,
Yeah, I think
the field going. Yeah,
and I think the high school level is just, I think so many coaches say it, it's going to explode, absolutely explode. And it's upon us. It's happening now, and it's in the next 10 years. Our goal certainly is to have somebody in some context on every high school campus. That's going to take some time, but I think these positions are really going to open up because the need 100% is there. There's going to be someone brilliant out there that kind of connects the dots with local public schools and school districts. They've started to do it in Texas and some other states that it's starting to happen. So that school districts and public schools really get on board. And I mean, think about how many public schools are out there. It's astronomical. How many public school positions could be made available to strength and conditioning professionals in the future. And that's going to be awesome. It's going to create jobs. It's going to, if anyone's anything like me, if I can stay in this position, I'll never leave. So it might get frustrating because I'm probably going to be an 80-year-old gray man that's not wanting to leave my position, and there's someone young in the wing waiting. But to catch on now is it's definitely taken off.
yeah. And I want to go back to what you mentioned earlier for young aspiring coaches, is that you mentioned get your teaching certification or
Yep.
be a viable source to coach a sport. Because like you
Sure.
said, I mean, where I'm living within 60 miles, I can only know of one school that has a strength and conditioning coach,
Right.
and also a PE teacher and a football coach.
Right.
Like I said, if you can have those things, on your resume or whatnot, that makes you more, hireable for
Absolutely.
especially public schools where they need probably some dual roles to, fit their budget and whatnot.
Right.
That was great advice.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And for young coaches, take advantage of what you know, and take advantage of what you've had your entire life, and don't let it take advantage of you. And social media is the big one. I think there's a lot of really, really good young coaches that use social media to their advantage. And that's the way to do it. Don't be shy or bashful. Don't be the guy that is a know-it-all, but take advantage. It might mean connecting with somebody, and 20 years ago, connecting with a coach with 35 years experience was much different than it is today. Take advantage of that. That's going to allow you so much more information than you could ever imagine, just because of the opportunities. And the next generation of coaches coming up, they're going to be so knowledgeable in social media and experts in social media that they're going to be able to make use of it. But again, it can't take advantage and make use of you. And it can't get the best of you as a coach and as a person.
Yes, absolutely. So we're going to just finish up here with our last kind of 4 common questions that we ask. First one, we kind of talked, off air, but what's a book that you recommend or, changed how you coach?
Yeah, and this might have, I'm glad you worded it, change how I coach, because this would probably be a better answer for what has changed the most in the last year. The APRE system is something that's so heavily and deeply ingrained into our program that I hate to mention, maybe I shouldn't hate to mention an ebook as the suggested book and materials, but the APR ebook is just phenomenal. And you know what I've taken from that, and more so, that's going to lead you down more avenues and what you really need to. I think the APRE system is something that we really, really need to dive into moving forward, and a lot of coaches have done a brilliant job with it. So starting there with the APRE, with the first ebook, and getting to know that methodology and that practice of training, and then kind of advance your knowledge from that standpoint. I think the APRE ebook is a way to start.
For some of the listeners that may not know what APRE, can you just give a general, just baseline background of what kind of that exactly means or how you implement it?
Sure. It basically, it is an opportunity to auto-regulate or to regulate around athlete readiness and preparedness. So it's an opportunity on a volume standpoint and intensity. You vary the intensity based on the athlete's ability in that day. It really, what you're looking for from a regulation standpoint is meeting training stress or overall stress with athlete readiness. So the APRE system is going to allow the athlete to determine its volume interset. So if it's, I don't want to get too deep into it, but if it's an APRE 6, it would mean that the expected rep volume or the expected rep value would be 6 reps. If you accomplish 8 reps or more, you would then increase the load for your next set. And if you go 2 reps below APRE 6, so 4 or below, you would lessen the load for the next set.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it.
I hope that's a good way to
Yeah.
describe it. Like I said, that's why you got to get
Statistic terms. Yeah.
it's much better. And there's so many things that we've gone off that with, and that would be a whole hour conversation in itself. But mixing and matching and locating and pairing up RPE. And we just had a conversation on Facebook, a couple of high school coaches, about APRE and RPE and maybe set rep values. So rather than say an APRE 6, say I want you to do 5 to 7 reps on this, and if you accomplish 7, maybe it's an increase if you're in season and you want to limit the volume or something like that. There's so many ways, and that's why I said, start with the ebook, reach out to Dr. Mann and find out more about his protocol, and expand on it yourself. It's definitely something that you can do with that program.
Yeah, a lot of rabbit holes you can go down with
yes,
APRE.
absolutely.
But like you said, it makes the training specific to the athlete on that day. Given their stresses, their fatigue, all that kind of stuff. So
absolutely,
it makes it specific. You talk about technology being something that's on the rise in our field. Any technologies that you have available to your use, or any kind of apps that you like to use, anything like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, from a technology standpoint, we don't have much right now. We try to make do in ways that we can. We'll do some things with stopwatches from a velocity-based standpoint, and it's pretty cool. But at the same time, it's not precise.
Yep.
But when you tell you tell a young student, hey, I want you to accomplish this amount of reps before I blow my whistle, it gets the competitive juices flowing, and they're moving the bar fast, and I'm happy. It's sometimes it's not ideal, but it might be optimal for what we have and what we have in front of us. So from a technology standpoint, there is some things that I want to get in the facility. Frankly, we're in the works, and I want to experiment with things before I flat out suggest to try something. But we certainly want to get some velocity velocity-based influence in the weight room when we get our new facility, which will be done in the next 2 months or so. That's going to be something that we want to add. We've had some conversations with GPS. Again, we'll think about it. We'll see what comes of it. There's a lot that comes into the fold there from a budgeting standpoint. Apps, I think, again, social media is huge to us. Social media is only going to get bigger. Instagram has been the number one way for me to develop as a coach and a professional, and to connect with coaches. I think, don't be shy, connect with coaches, let them know how much you appreciate what they've done for the profession. And they're rarely going to turn you away. I think it's a great opportunity to get to know and learn what some other coaches are doing. Some coaches are more than willing to share on there, and they share just about everything they do. So you have an opportunity virtually to sit in somebody's weight room every day just by clicking an icon on your phone. I think that's something that helps us a lot. Twitter, of course, is awesome. But though, as far as those apps, I think those are two of the apps. Social media really is the big one.
Yes, yeah. I mean, we connected via social media, and here
Yeah,
we are now chatting right now. So I mean, that's,
exactly.
like you said, the power of social media.
Absolutely.
Oh, what are some of your favorite websites or blogs that you like to visit or recommend to other strength and conditioning coaches?
Yeah. I think the Simply Faster blog has become one of my favorites over the last few months. If you're unfamiliar with that, I think it's .org. So it's simply SIMPLI
Right.
faster FASTER. I think it's .org. Forgive me if I'm wrong on that, but if you search Simply Faster blog, you could find that. Another blog that's really good that I like is the Excel Training Designs blog. It has some really, really good stuff. And usually Coach Olson will share a bunch of posts from other coaches that is just awesome. And especially those two sites, if you want to talk about technology, and sometimes, frankly, I sit in my seat and I realize how far behind I am on some coaches from not necessarily having technology, but understanding and being able to apply it. Those two blogs are great for that. Outside of that, I think the normal ones are some of the best ones always. I think most strength coaches check out the Elite FTS blog, and Eric Cressy's blog, and Mike Boyle's blog, and some of those brilliant coaches that have put out information and are willing to continue putting out that information. Those are some of my favorites.
Yes. Yeah, the amount of stuff you can do with Excel is crazy
I know.
in terms of program design. It's just it's watching some of those videos. I'm like, how the heck I can't.
I know.
I'm just terrible when it comes to Word or Excel. My knowledge in that, but I mean, there's some cool stuff and just
Yes,
time
sir.
savers that you can do with that. Especially like you said, you're working with 80 athletes at a time, possibly in a weight room. I mean, that's a game changer. Yeah.
Yeah, and I told you we go all on sheet, so
Yeah.
that accounts for everything we do. Although relatively speaking, I'm a young coach. I'm old school in that I want it on paper.
Yeah.
The computer's awesome, but I want it on paper. And like I said, we do a lot of APRE work, so a lot varies on a daily basis. RPE might as well. So if we're going RPE 8 out of 10, and their 8 out of 10 might be different than it was. It might be lower than it was, or it might be lower in load than it was 3 weeks ago. Well, that wouldn't be a percentage-based progression. That would be in your typical Excel format.
Yep.
So I've got my pen around, and all of the athletes have their golf pencils,
Yep.
and we're filling out something on a daily basis. So that is how I like it. And I like looking at things on paper. That's just the way I've been.
Definitely agree. Well, John, this has been great. Where can some listeners, reach out to you or find you on social media, or if they have questions or want to, talk to you further?
Yeah, I think without getting through the whole laundry list of connections, Instagram's probably the best, and that's where I have a lot of my contact information, at least email, and then my email signature will have everything else. I'm not afraid to give out my cell phone number if any coaches want to connect, always. So coach_Garrish, GARRISH, is my Instagram, and then John, JOHN_Garrish, spelled the same way as my Twitter handle. And those are the basic two social media sites that I'll connect through. And I've gotten into the last year really connecting with coaches over Facebook as well. That's not a problem. If you go ahead and search my name, I'm sure anyone in our profession, we're going to have at least one mutual friend. So I think the search might pop up. Yeah, that's the best way to contact me. And then, like I said, if coaches want to dive into that conversation and connection a little bit more, I'm always down for that, through email or just a simple call, a phone call.
Well, John, man, I really appreciate this. This is great. A lot of nuggets were shared today. I think you did an awesome job, and I'm glad you got to be able to stop by and share some of your knowledge.
Thanks, Coach. I've learned a lot from you from a distance. It's truly an honor to be on and really just talk about what goes on in North Broward. I love the place. To get the opportunity to I know I can't really say any names, but feel in my heart that I'm talking about these kids,
Yeah.
and getting to share what we do on a daily basis. It means a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to our students as well. So, on behalf of all of us, I really appreciate you having me on.
Great. Yeah, your passion is evident, and I'm glad your athletes are lucky athletes to have you there.
Thanks a lot, Coach.
We'll talk to you soon. Join me in thanking John for this wonderful episode of the Elite Performance Podcast. John really opened up, was honest, and gave us a real insight into his training at North Broward Prep and some of his major influences on what he's doing. Just a wonderful discussion John had, and I'm extremely thankful. And I hope all of you are thankful for the information that he shared. So if you would, please go on Twitter or Instagram and give him a follow. Send him a thank you for his great insight today. Until next time, we'll see you guys back at the Elite Sports Performance Podcast for episode 8.